Hello, welcome to this edition of Mrs. Martinez's U.S. History class. I am Mrs. Martinez. Today we're going to be talking about the introduction to World War II, talk about some key players, talk about the rise of Hitler, and the start of World War II. Please make sure you follow along in your notes. You will need this information later when we take our test over this information in a few weeks. So be paying attention. The more you write down, the better you will be for when you take your test. All right, first slide is about some key people. Any guesses on our first person? Great guesses. First person, Adolf Hitler. We know him, we hate him, we learn about him, okay? This guy's a bad dude, and we'll talk specifically about why he's a bad dude in a few days, maybe next week. Not sure when these videos are going to go up. But he is the leader of Germany, as most of you probably know from various movies and video games that you've played in the past, TV shows and the like. We're not going to talk about him a whole lot right now. You should have already read about him in the packet that I gave to you digitally. And you should have answered some questions on Schoology. So if you have not done that yet, please make your way over and read that before you continue with this video. You need that information before you watch this. Our second person is this guy named Benito Mussolini. He was the dictator of Italy during World War II. He is also a pretty bad dude. He was what is called a fascist, as well as Hitler was a fascist. And we'll talk about what fascism is a little bit later on, but basically this means that they were oppressive to the people that lived in their countries. So he is not a nice person. We'll talk about him later on as well. Third, we have a man named Joseph Stalin. He was the dictator of Russia, which is later called the Soviet Union, during World War II and after World War II. He is actually on the United States side in World War II. So although Russia today is not an ally of the United States, if you remember World War I, we were allies, and in World War II we are allies. Fourth, and the most important to U.S. history, is our president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Remember, he was the president during most of the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl, got us out of the Depression. So a very important figure. You need to know that he was the president during World War II, and you need to know some facts about him, which we'll talk about later on. And number 5 is Winston Churchill. He is the leader of the United Kingdom, the prime minister. There was a queen at the time, or a king, don't remember, not a European historian, but Churchill, even though he wasn't the king, he was the prime minister, and that is like the president for the United Kingdom. And he and FDR and Stalin were all on the same side, and they were all pretty good friends. And you'll see a lot of pictures of them all standing together, but Churchill and Roosevelt are really best buds. And those two make decisions together throughout the war until Roosevelt ends up dying and Harry Truman takes over. We'll talk about that once we get to the end of World War II. All right, some key facts we need to know. The war itself lasted from 1939 to 1945. The United States did not join in 1939. We joined a few years later due to, anybody know the reason we joined? Good job, all of you that said it. Pearl Harbor, okay? Japan attacks the United States at our naval base in Hawaii, and we enter the war after that. So we do not start in the war. Okay, throughout the war, including Americans, Europeans, Asians, Africans, like South Americans, everyone's fighting in this, okay? The total number of people that die is 70 million people, which makes this the largest war in human history. Okay, World War I was called the Great War and the War to End All Wars, which ends up not being true at all. In fact, it gets surpassed in the death toll by World War II. Okay, we have 2 alliances in World War II. Much simpler to remember than World War I. Okay, we don't have anything crazy really going on here. The Allied powers are Russia, England, and France, just like they were in World War I, and then the U.S. joins later, just like we did in World War I. Okay, same deal there. The other power, though, is called the Axis, okay? The Axis. And the three main powers here, Germany, Italy, and Japan. There are other countries fighting with and against these countries, but we're going to focus on these 7, okay? The 6 original, and then when the U.S. joins partway through the war. We will not be focusing a whole lot on the battles of World War World War II, especially the European ones that happened before the U.S. joins, just because we're short on time. But if you're interested in that, I can totally link you guys some articles and things if you're interested in battles. Okay, so let me know. All right, causes of World War II. You will be reading some articles, or will have read some articles, depending on when you're watching this, about the causes. There are 3 main causes, and they spell out the acronym WAR, W-A-R. So the first thing that caused World War II was actually World War I. And if you've read your Adolf Hitler reading like you were supposed to, right? If you didn't, you're supposed to go back and read it. So if you didn't, go back now, stop, pause the video, come back here. Okay, World War I is a cause of World War II. So if we remember, World War I completely tears apart Europe. It makes it so that it is impossible for different countries like Belgium to rebuild. And so they end up having the Treaty of Versailles that punishes the Germans for everything, even though they weren't the only guilty parties. Remember, they get all the blame. And so Germany, right, they have this massive economic crisis where the Weimar Republic prints all this money to pay the reparations, and it makes the money worthless. It makes it so that people can't buy stuff because there's so much money. They need more and more of it to pay for things, and then it basically becomes trash. So then we have people burning it, building blocks with it, putting it on their walls as wallpaper. So Germany is PO'd at the Allies. They're PO'd at France and England and the US and Russia, and they want payback, okay? And that's why Hitler, he writes this like manifesto, Mein Kampf, to say like all of his ideas about what Germany needs to do to become this awesome world power again. And so they're not happy campers. And so World War I is a direct cause of World War II in that way. All right, second, we have appeasement. And again, you're going to be reading about this or have read about this. Appeasement, that basically means, right, when you let someone have something, you let them do what they want to appease them, to make them feel better. So if I'm having a fight with a friend about something that I think is stupid, I might just tell her that she's right. Like, I don't really care. I just want us to be friends again. So I'm going to, let her have her way. It doesn't matter. The friendship is more important to me than the argument. So this is what happens with Germany. Other European nations, especially England and France, allowed Germany to take over territory that wasn't theirs. Okay, and they let this happen because they want to prevent a war. So if they thought if Hitler just takes what he wants, like Austria, then he will just go away. And he can have what he wants and it will be fine and we don't have to have a war, which did not happen and actually made it a lot worse. Okay, and third is the rise of totalitarianism. So I have the word total underlined in there. Totalitarianism, but it comes from the word total. So this is a government structure that is basically a dictatorship. So in Germany, Italy, Japan, and Russia, all these countries had dictators, which we saw on that first slide. Japan had an emperor. We're not going to focus on him necessarily, but if you want more information on him, again, let me know. I can put some stuff out there for you. So these countries, specifically Germany, Italy, and Russia, though, are really big dictatorships, and they had a lot of lack of freedom in these countries. So like you read about in the Hitler reading, he would burn books, burn newspapers, burn posters that said bad things about him. He forced teachers to align themselves with the Nazi Party. So they didn't have freedom of speech. You could not say bad stuff about Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin. You would get shot or thrown into jail or a concentration camp. You also did not have freedom of religion. So we all know about the Holocaust and the killing of Jews, But other religions were also targeted. So some of you might know from your research that different Christian groups were targeted. So people like Jehovah's Witnesses, like the people that come and knock on your door and ask you if you know Jesus, those people were targeted. Mormons were targeted. These are Christian groups. So it wasn't just Jewish people. A lot of these countries at the time, they actually hated religion. Like Hitler was not a Christian man. He wasn't like, I hate Jews because I'm a Christian. That was not true. He just didn't like religion in general. And an interesting thing is that in Japan, they actually don't, back then, not now, but at this time, they did not have a lot of religion in Japan, and most people actually kind of worshipped the emperor. He was almost like a god figure to the Japanese during World War II. And so if you weren't following the emperor, then you were going against their quote-unquote religion. And that was the same thing with Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. They were like the god figure. They didn't want religion in their countries because they wanted to be in power. Okay, that's the same reason they didn't let people have free speech or press. They didn't want people to choose to love them. They wanted to make them love them. Okay, totalitarianism. They're totally in control. Okay, so what does Hitler want? I'm going to kind of breeze through this slide because you should have already read about this in your reading. Militarism, right? We talked about the Treaty of Versailles. Part of the treaty said that Germany could not rearm, so build up their military. And specifically in this region called the Rhineland, which is the southern part of Germany. And Hitler broke that treaty and he built the military up anyway because he wanted a strong military. Second thing, Lebensraum. Talked about this in the article. This means living space or living room. Not like your living room with the TV, but living room like breathing room or like to stretch your legs kind of. And he was able to take over Austria peacefully, but then he started invading other places like the Sudetenland or the southern lands in Czechoslovakia. And that was given to him basically by Great Britain and France as part of that appeasement. Okay. Then he crossed a line though. And Great Britain and France were like, you need to stay out of Poland. But he took over the rest of Czechoslovakia and then Poland, and that was too far. All right, so here's a map we can look at. So Germany, 1933, this is before the war, pretty far before, during the Great Depression era, which Germany was also feeling, right, because they had that, the Weimar Republic failing economically. So the red spaces, this is what Germany had. The pink here represents the Sudetenland, the Rhineland, which is this area down here, and Czechoslovakia and Austria. And so these places they were allowed to take. Hitler was appeased in this way, and they thought that that would be enough, but it was not for Hitler. In 1943, he invades Poland, which is this orange area here. If you also notice, he starts to invade Belgium and France, and this is the big deal, okay, right? Because Belgium and France were the two countries that were hit hardest by the weaponry in World War I. And so Germany taking over this area was a big no-no. So like I said, he invades Poland and England attacks. So then he invades that Allied territory, that Belgium and France region. Okay, and so, and I forgot to mention Russia. He also invades part of Russia, which is a bad idea because next year when we talk about world history, anybody that invades Russia does not do very well. And so Hitler kind of makes a big mistake here, and this is what leads them to go to war. Okay, he also used something called Blitzkrieg. Blitz meaning lightning and Krieg meaning war in German. And this was an artillery strategy strategy to basically overwhelm the enemy with tanks, guns, and planes. And these were methods that Hitler kind of developed from his experience as a World War I soldier, seeing the tanks and armed aircrafts and the machine guns. And so Hitler was really building up that military strength to take over these different places. Okay, and so by the end of the war, this is what Europe looks like. The blue is what Germany has taken over. Right here, I know it's a little blurry, this is Germany, right in here. Takes over all of France, Italy's on their side, takes over part of Africa, invades Russia, takes over Denmark, Southern Europe, Greece, okay? This is a big deal, guys, that this is one of the largest invasions of all time in modern history, really only rivaled by ancient civilizations. So the Nazi Empire really was an empire. They were really trying to take over Europe. All right, and the rise of Hitler. This is kind of an overview of what you should have already read. Popular World War I war hero. Okay, he claimed he could fix Germany, make it better than it was under the Weimar Republic. He wrote Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle, which is full of his ideas that he wrote in prison right after he tried to overthrow the government. And he was appointed the Chancellor of Germany in 1933 by President Hindenburg. So Germany, they still use a structure today where they have a president and a chancellor. And it used to be that the president had the main power and the chancellor was kind of like the vice president. Hitler actually, during his power, switched it. And so today, the chancellor is the person who's mostly in charge, and Hitler did a power grab and took over that role and made it so the president is actually more like our vice president and the chancellor is more like our president. So he was able to take control and write what I just said. Okay, and then our last slide. So once Hitler was in power, he created basically what we know as the Nazi Party. And a big part of this was anti-Semitic propaganda. So remember, anti-Semitic means anti-Jewish, and propaganda is a term that we use to describe media created by governments to convey a message. So it can be good or it can be bad. In this case, it's bad. Okay, this propaganda blamed the Jews for Germany's problems. They described the Jews as greedy, as dirty, and as criminals. And this actually, guys, this is not just something that was happening in Germany. This was happening all throughout Europe and in the United States. So I'll just tell you right now, the United States was also very anti-Semitic during this time. A lot of people in Europe and the United States did not like Jews and still don't like Jews. This is a very big problem that still is happening today. Jews were basically blamed for killing Jesus. So if you know that story where Jesus was crucified, Easter just happened, so maybe you've heard this recently, but a lot of Christians blamed Jews for killing Jesus, and so that was a reason that they hated the Jews, even though clearly this is thousands of years later. These people have nothing to do with what happened in the past. A lot of Jews also at the time were money lenders, so like bankers, and people blamed them for losing their homes if they couldn't make their payments on time. That's why they called them greedy. The dirty thing, the criminal thing, really there's no reason for that. They just didn't like them. Hitler also idealized this thing called the Aryan race, which I kind of mentioned in my notes from the Hitler reading. The Aryan race is a made-up race. It basically means white, but specific types of white. So if you saw that chart, Hitler really believed that people from Germany, England, France, Russia, like Northern Europe, were like the perfect type of white people. And so he really wanted blonde hair, blue-eyed people in Germany. That's the Aryan race. And like I said, this is a made-up thing. There are different types of genetics that go into hair color and eye color, and it really has nothing to do with your race. You can be born with blue eyes and be black or be Hispanic, it just bad science. Okay, and like I said, blonde hair, blue eyes stuff. And then fascist socialism. So fascism is basically like totalitarianism. So it's where one person takes over things through a dictatorship. Socialism means things controlled by the state, by the government. So what Hitler really wanted was for his government to be not democratic. He hated democracy. He did not want people to vote. He just wanted to keep power. He also hated communism, which is weird because communist Russia was doing very similar things to socialist Germany at the time, but socialists and communists did not agree on what was correct. And so he hated communism. He also hated capitalism, which is what France and England were at the time. So democracy, right? This is America. Communism, Russia. Capitalism, England and France. So anything that represented these other countries, he hated, and he just wanted his way. Okay, and he took away all local government's power. There was lots of German states, and still are today. He took away the state's power to decide for things for themselves. And Hitler basically made it so that he declared war, or when he got war declared on him, he just went to war without consulting the states for their advice. Okay, and then if you did not conform, if you did not obey Hitler, you would be punished or killed. And we will talk about what that looked like next week when we talk about the Holocaust and the persecution of Jewish people in Germany and Europe in general. So please let me know in the comments if you have questions, or shoot me an email, okay? I am happy to answer whatever questions you have. Let me know if you'd like more information on any of the topics that we talked about today. I will be happy to send you more information. Until next time, I'll see you later.